So thank you to everyone for joining us today for our workshop on accessible voting options for the upcoming election. My name is Chris Butler. I'm the Executive Director at Insight, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Rob Rock. Rob is the Director of Elections at the Rhode Island Secretary of State's office. And today we wanted to talk about accessible voting. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in the upcoming election. And so we wanted to give folks as much information as we can about how to participate in the upcoming election. So Rob, if you want to unmute yourself, and thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Chris.
So let's start with the most basic information, Rob. I think most importantly is, when is Election Day this year?
Yeah. So Election Day is November 3rd. However, we like to say that, and it's up on the screen there yet, November 3rd, we've got a couple other deadlines there as well. But we really think, every day starting next week is really Election Day. Mail ballots are going to start going out on Monday for those that have applied and have been processed. And clearly anyone that gets their ballot, that's kind of their little Election Day when they cast their ballot. We also have the ability to vote early, which we'll talk about a little bit later, Chris. But the actual Election Day that we all know is Tuesday, November 3rd.
Great. And so who is eligible to vote in this year's election?
So anybody who is registered to vote by this Sunday, which is October 4th, and who's 18 years old on Election Day can cast the ballot. So we do have a unique law in Rhode Island where 16 and 17-year-olds can register to vote, but they cannot cast a ballot until they're 18. So as long as you're registered to vote by Sunday, you're able to cast a ballot so long as you're 18 on Election Day.
And so if for some reason folks aren't sure, maybe it's been a few years since they last voted, if folks aren't sure what their current status is as far as their registration, how can they find out?
They can do a couple things. First, they can go to our website, which is listed right at the bottom of your screen, vote.ri.gov or vote.sos.ri.gov, and you can check the status of your registration. You can also call our office at 401-222-2340, or your city or town as well. You could call any one of those places to find out if you're registered to vote.
So obviously we know that there's a presidential election this year. It's been a little bit of news about that, but other things that folks might find on their ballots this year, other races, are there statewide questions this year, local questions that folks?
Yes. Yep. So you have the typical, normal candidate races on the ballot. So you've got, everybody is going to have president, United States Senate, and congressional, whether you live in Congressional 1 or Congressional District 2. Everybody's going to have a state Senate race and a state rep race. And then depending on where you live, you'll have other local races as well. Things like town council, school committee. I know, Chris, the ballot that you had on the screen at the very beginning is, I think, a ballot from Lincoln that has things like water commissioner on it that not every town has. So everybody's got president, U.S. Senate, Congress, state Senate, state House, and then depending on where you live, we'll have your local races as well. And then on the back of the ballot, there will be, everybody is going to have one state question. That question is asking you if you want to change the name of the state from the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations to just the state of Rhode Island. And then depending on where you live, you may have a local question or two. Cranston, for example, has 10 local questions. So it depends on where you live about whether or not there'll be local questions.
Great. And I did on the screen now for folks who are participating via video, I did pull up the homepage for the vote.sos.ri.gov. There's lots of resources there in the Voter Information Center, and one of those is the option to find your polling place and view your sample ballot. So that's something that I did yesterday, so I could find out what exactly would be on the ballot that I would be presented with for this year's election. So that's one good resource. So my understanding is that this year there are 3 distinct ways that people can vote in this year's election. One way is by mail ballot, another is by early in-person voting, and then the third way is the more traditional in-person voting at a polling place on November 3rd, which is Election Day. So let's talk about each method separately, and we'll start with mail ballots. So first, is everyone who's registered to vote eligible to vote in this year's election by mail?
Yes. Yep. So as long as you're registered by Sunday, you're able to request a mail ballot and be sent one. And that's As you can imagine, that method of voting has skyrocketed. Just quickly, in the 2016, the last time we elected a president, 2016 November, 40,000 people requested a mail ballot. For this year so far, and we're still a week and a half away from the deadline, about 140,000 people have requested a mail ballot. So those numbers are skyrocketing for those that want to vote by mail.
And so can you walk folks through the process if I want to vote by mail? What's the process that I go through to let my local city or town know that I want to receive my ballot through the mail?
Yeah, so we sent a mail ballot application to every registered voter in the state, and we did so. You probably received it the week of let's see, where are we at now? I think the week of the 14th or the week of the 21st of September, you should have received your application. So most people that are requesting mail ballots are taking the application we've sent them, putting it in, filling it out, signing it, putting it into the envelope that we provided, postage paid, and sending it back to our office. We've had over 80,000 people take advantage of that method. And then there were about 40,000 people that had previously applied for a mail ballot. So at this point, either take the application that we gave you and fill it out and send it in, or you could go to our website and you could print out an application and you could fill that out and send it in, or visit your city or town hall and fill out the application and send it in. The deadline to apply for a mail ballot is October 13th. So we're about a week and a half away. It's a Tuesday, not this coming Tuesday, the Tuesday after, October 13th. And that way you have plenty of time to get your ballot, vote it, and send it back.
One of the questions that I received is when folks are filling out the mail ballot application, it obviously asks for you to sign it, to sign an affidavit that you are who you say you are and that you are requesting the ballot. So two questions came up. Sometimes folks with visual impairments have trouble being able to sign their name. And so some folks use a stamp, like a rubber stamp that is imprinted with their signature, and that's how they sign their checks. So one person asked if they could use a stamp signature on their mail ballot application. And if not, if just writing an X in place of their signature would be valid for requesting a mail ballot.
Yes, so the latter is the preferred option, and it's stated so right on the application, is if there's an issue signing that an X would be better. Stamps are a little bit more tricky because of the fact that cities and towns have to compare the signatures. And so when they see the X, they know that that the individual may have an issue signing. So that's not a problem. But the stamp might be different. It might look different than the signature that is on file for the voter from when they registered to vote. So I want to avoid having an application be rejected for that reason. So the X, the cities and towns know that that's good, that's valid. The stamp, they might not realize it's a stamp, and so they might try to compare that signature with how the voter originally signed, and then they might say, well, it doesn't match, and so they'd reject it. So I would suggest going with the latter and putting the X.
Great. And for folks who are, their vision is at a point where they can't access the mail ballot, the printed mail ballot, I know that you folks provide ballots in Braille, which we actually produce here at Insight. So what's the process if somebody would like to vote using a Braille ballot? What's the process they would use to request that?
Yeah, and Chris, I'll just correct you there for a second. You're the ones that provide the Braille ballot, so we're very grateful for the partnership, and thank you. So folks who want to apply for a Braille or a tactile ballot as well, Chris, we offer the tactile option. All they need to do is fill out an application. There's another application for a Braille ballot, and we're trying to, for next election, we're going to try to do this to avoid voters having to fill out more than one application. But there is a separate Braille or tactile application that voters are supposed to fill out. The state law requires that people who want a Braille or tactile ballot, they have to apply 45 days before the election, which was September, I think, 19th. We actually don't. Anyone that wants a Braille ballot, we're going to make sure we get them a Braille ballot, whether they apply today or whether they apply by the deadline. Thanks to you, Chris. And the tactile ballot, the same thing. So even though we're past the deadline, folks can still apply for one using the form that's on our website, which is the application for a Braille or tactile ballot. We also, Chris, have another option that we're actually rolling out in the next week, we're hoping, is for people to be able to get access to their ballot online. So we're working with a company called Democracy Live, which has made inroads across the country. in accessible mail ballots. And so what we're going to be able to offer voters in the next week or so is the ability to go onto our website and actually pull up the ballot like you did, Chris, but be able to use your screen reader or whatever method the voter would choose to actually mark their ballot online. They still have to print it and send it in, but we're going to provide the ability for folks to mark their ballot online. And this is voters who have visual impairments or are, the law talks about visually impaired and disabled voters. And so voters that fall in those categories are able to take advantage of this option. Everybody can't, but we're just getting ready to roll out that technology, and we expect to have it out next week.
That's great. So will there be a separate process that folks will have to go through to apply to get access to the online ballot?
No. So the form, if you look at, actually, Chris, can you scroll down a little bit?
I'm not actually on the website. I just.
Oh, you're not? Okay. Oh, got it. I'm sorry. Okay. So on our website, if I know you can't scroll down, but if you did scroll down just a little bit, you'll see the mail ballot application for the November election. And we added a box on the application for if folks are visually impaired to check the box, and we would be able to send that, or we were able to provide you that information on our website so that you can mark your ballot online. So there's really no extra step except they've got to check the box on the application that's now on our website.
That's great. And so once they do that, you guys will reach out when that technology is available to let them know how to access it.
So long as they give us an email address. Yes, it's important that they give an email address so that we can send the link to be able to get access to their ballot.
Excellent. So if I do the traditional mail ballot, Braille ballot, how do I get it back to you folks? What are the options for making sure that my ballot gets in to be counted?
Yeah, so we provide all of the necessary envelopes, postage paid, in the packet that we send the voter. So whether it's Braille or tactile, we provide all the necessary envelopes for the voter to cast their ballot and send it back. Of course, the voter has the ability to drop it in a Dropbox or have somebody drop it in a Dropbox for them. They can return it in person to the city or town or the Board of Elections or our office. So there are a number of ways of getting it back. And one of the ways I just mentioned a Dropbox, which we'll talk about a little bit further on, I'm sure. But there will be a Dropbox at every city and town hall in the state, our office, and the Board of Elections. So 41 options to drop off your either mail ballot or your Braille or tactile ballot 24 hours a day, 7 days a week between now and November 3rd.
And so there's been a lot in the news about concerns about the post office's ability to get ballots back in a timely way to you folks. Does the Secretary of State's office have a recommendation of by what point you want to make sure that you have your ballot in the mail to ensure that it gets to you in time?
Yes. And I can assure you that I do not share the same sentiments that some of you've heard a lot of reports at the national level. The president has made statements. I have not seen, and we've been working with the post office for years. We've had 2 big elections this year already with a high number of mail ballots, and we have not seen an issue with the post office in delivering mail. However, I understand that it is a concern for people. So what the post office has indicated to us, and actually, if you could see out my window, the post office is right outside my window. We have a very close relationship with them. We meet with them, once every 2 weeks to make sure things are good. But what the post office is recommending is 1 week travel of mail ballots. Now that's kind of a national standard. In Rhode Island, we send all of our mail ballots by first class mail. And this post office standards for first class mail is 2 to 5 days. So while the post office is playing it safe for the 7-day, we think that you can send it back a little bit sooner or less than that. But on the mail ballot instructions that we provide every mail ballot voter, we're saying that you should send your ballot back by October 27th, which is exactly 1 week before the election. And that gives people, way plenty time to get their ballot back. I personally think that if you send your ballot back by, the Friday before the election, it would be able to get to the Board of Elections in time for Tuesday. But I think to play it safe, October 27th is the date that we've been given. And I will tell you that, that's one thing that because of the post office and part of the narrative that things may be a little bit slower is why we've pushed the drop boxes as well. So those drop boxes, you essentially could drop your ballot in a drop box on election day at 7:59. So if you get your ballot, in the next week or two and wait to send it back and you forget, all of a sudden it's election day, you can drop it in a drop box. And as long as it reaches that drop box by 8 o'clock on election night, your ballot will be counted. So we're pushing drop boxes big time.
That's great. And I see on the Voter Information Center website that there's a button that says track the status of my mail ballot. So folks are able to kind of put their mind at ease that the mail ballot has actually been received and put into the system.
That's correct. So you'll be able to see when your application was received by the city or town, when the ballot was sent to you, and when the ballot was received by the Board of Elections. So you get access to all that information. And you'll, for those of you that have applied by mail, and you check our website on Tuesday, you should see that your ballot was mailed on October 5th, which was Monday, and that you can expect it in 2 or 3 days.
That's great. One last question about the mail ballots, and this is something that I've personally wondered about. Obviously, with Braille ballots, tactile ballots, they don't get fed through the optical scanners the same way that a printed ballot does. So how does those ballots get processed, and how do those votes end up in the system?
Yeah, so those ballots get processed the same way that the Board of Elections processes the military and overseas ballots. So that option that I talked about, Chris, about voters being able to use online to mark their ballots and print them and send them back, we offer that service to the military and overseas voters as well. So they send their ballots back the same way. And so what will happen is the Board of Elections will have a bipartisan pair of election officials do what's called a remake. They actually take the Braille ballot or the tactile ballot, and they remake it onto a ballot that can be fed through the mail ballot machine. So the ballots are remade and fed through the machines.
Excellent. So let's move on to early in-person voting, which at least for me is kind of a new concept, although I think it may have been available in previous elections. So if somebody feels uncomfortable going to did they miss the deadline for the mail ballot, or they just physically want to be able to go and feed their ballot into a machine, but they're afraid of COVID on election day, or they have plans, are going to be away on election day and still want to vote in person. My understanding is that they can still vote in person before election day. And so I guess the question is, where and how do people do that?
Sure. So you're right, Chris. It's a relatively, we've had the ability starting on the 20th day before the election. So the mail ballot deadline is October 13th, which is the 21st day before the election. Starting on the next day, which is October 14th, and through November 2nd, you can go to your city or town hall and you can vote a ballot early. And just like you said, Chris, the good thing about it, and this is the first time that this is going to happen in Rhode Island, is that ballot is going to be able to be fed into a voting machine by the voter. So previous to 2020, the option was still available to vote at your city or town hall on the 20 days before the election, but that was a mail ballot. So you'd get the ballot, you'd vote it, it would go into an envelope, and then it would be delivered to the Board of Elections by the city or town. Now we're putting a voting machine at every city and town hall. So somebody that goes in during the October 14th through November 2nd time frame, they're going to vote. It's going to be just like a polling place. You show your ID, you'll be given a ballot, you vote that ballot and slide it into a voting machine. You get your I voted sticker and you're good to go. So it's a new concept in that you'll feed it into a machine, but you've had the opportunity to vote early before. And so you go to your city or town hall and just be wary, or not be wary, but just be mindful of cities and towns have to be open in order to allow people to vote. But there might be some precautions that are going to have to take place, because by and large, in our office is one as well, where we're closed to the public, but we let folks in when it comes to voting. So you may have to call ahead, or you might have to call when you get there, or you might have to stand outside while someone ahead of you votes because of the whole social distancing thing. But all 39 cities and towns are going to be open during the 14th through November 2nd to be able to cast your ballot in person.
That's great. And so my understanding from talking to people about people who did early in-person voting for the primary is that all of these city and town halls also had the AutoMark voting machines available for people to use, so that folks who want to use the AutoMark could also use those for early in-person voting. Is that going to be the same for the election?
Yes, correct.
And so for folks who aren't familiar with the AutoMark, can you just kind of briefly describe what it is?
Sure. So the AutoMark is a ballot marking device. So for voters, and by the way, any voter can use it, but for those voters who are visually or hearing impaired, are able to use the machine without any assistance. So you'll go into the polling place, you'll be given your ballot, And you'll, instead of going to a voting booth, you'll go to the auto mark, which is pictured on the screen. There's a little tray. You can see it down towards the bottom of the unit where you slide your ballot in. And by the way, if you'd like help, poll workers will assist you. But the point of the machine is to allow folks to vote on their own independently without any assistance. So the ballot will be fed into the auto mark and will appear on the screen in front of you. So you see the screen that's located on the machine, and it essentially will either show you a picture of the ballot so that you can mark your ballot either using a touch screen or using the keypad that's on the right with the arrows, or you could put the headset on and you could listen to a voice read you the ballot. That way it would help you mark your ballot the way you'd like. So you'd use either the touch screen or those down arrows and up arrows on the right-hand side to select your choice, and use that middle button to hit select, and it makes the choices for you. You go through your entire ballot, and then you have the ability to review your choices and who you have selected so far. If you agree, you hit mark your ballot. The machine will mark the ballot as you intended it, and it will spit the ballot out to you. You take that ballot and you slide it into a voting machine, just like you would have if you marked your ballot with a paper and pen method.
Great. So the final way that folks can vote is to actually go to a polling place on November 3rd on Election Day. So what time will the polls be open in Rhode Island on Election Day?
So the polls are open at 7 a.m. unless you live in Block Island, and they'll open at 9. So I think everybody is on the mainland here, opens at 7 a.m. and polls close at 8 p.m. And the only caveat is that if you are at a polling place that happens to have a line at the end of the day, then anybody who's in line by 8 p.m. can cast a ballot. So if you show up at 7:59 and there are 15 people ahead of you, you're going to be able to cast your ballot, even though you're casting your ballot after 8 o'clock. So as long as you're in line by November 3rd at 8 p.m., you will be able to cast your ballot.
Great. And during the primary, many of the usual polling place locations were closed due to more people voting by mail than usual. Do you think that'll be the same for the upcoming election? And if so, how can people find out where exactly their polling place will be on November 3rd?
I do think it'll be the same. And Chris, it's not so much about mail ballots. It's just about having trouble finding polling places that are willing to be open for the public. So as you can imagine, assisted living facilities, nursing homes that are normally really good places to be polling places because they've got big community rooms, they've got plenty of parking, they're ADA compliant. They're not allowing the state or the cities and towns to be used as polling places. So towns are being creative, and what they're doing is they're trying to get the best locations they can find, which are usually now schools. Schools are closed on Election Day. They're ADA compliant, plenty of parking. And sometimes they're having more than one polling place inside one of those schools. So the bottom line is that where you normally vote, and I use that in air quotes because I know many of you, myself included, in my about 15 years of voting, I've probably voted at 6 different polling places in my town, just because of moving and things like that. So I would, you may not be voting at the polling place that you normally vote at, but everybody will be assigned a polling place. And what I would suggest is visiting our website in another couple weeks. We're going to put the polling place information up there probably next week, but I would urge you to check back on our website closer to Election Day, maybe even the week before or even Election Day, to make sure that your polling place is moved. I'll give you a quick example for the primary that was on September 8th. The week before the primary, 3 polling places had to move because of COVID related issues. So while we may put it up, in the next week or so, check back, right before the election to make sure that your polling place has not moved, and be mindful and be prepared to vote at a location that you maybe haven't voted for before.
Great. And folks could also call their city or town hall.
Of course.
And folks could always call Insight as well. Either Lucille or I or Doreen are happy to walk you through and go onto the website for you and help you with any information you need about where to vote on Election Day. So if somebody goes to either early in-person voting or they go to vote on Election Day in a polling place, they're not really comfortable about using the automark voting machine, but they can't see the printed ballot on their own. Are folks able to bring a family member or a friend with them to the polling table to, have that person help them fill out the ballot?
Yes, so they can either request assistance from the bipartisan pair of poll workers at the polling place, or yes, they could bring a family member, a loved one. Really, anybody can join a voter, with the exception of their employer or someone that's affiliated with the union if they're involved in a union. So the state law is pretty clear that anybody can help, with the exception of, with those two exceptions, the employer or the something to do with the union, a union representative. Also, folks have the ability to bring in their child. If they have childcare issues, they can bring a child up till 18 into the voting booth with them on election day.
Great. So just to summarize for everybody, we're really encouraging folks to have a plan for voting this year, being there's so many options and so many things that are up in the air. It's really important for folks to have a plan for how you're going to vote this year. So really take some time to decide, are you going to vote by mail? Are you going to vote early in person? Or are you going to plan to vote in person on election day? If you're voting by mail, make sure that you apply for your mail ballot by the deadline, Rob, which is October 4th?
13th.
13th. So by October 13th, make sure that you've applied for your mail ballot, and make sure that you get your mail ballot back before election day, whether you mail it 5 to 7 days before the election, or plan to have it put in one of the drop boxes, which are located across the state. If you're voting early in person, make sure that you determine where you're going to vote and when. If you need transportation to get there and back, make sure that you do that, set up your transportation. Really think about whether you need accommodations. I know a few folks that voted early in person who plan to use the AutoMark voting machines called ahead of time just to make sure that the machine was going to be on and somebody would be there to help them if they needed help to use it. So doing that little bit of planning ahead. And obviously, if you need a magnifier or other tools to be able to see your ballot, you want to make sure that you bring those with you. And if you're voting in person on election day, make sure, as Rob said, to check in either on their website or with your city or town hall to determine where your polling place is going to be, just in case it moved. Think about your transportation needs for that day. Bring your magnifier or other tools if you're going to use the printed ballot. And think about if there's other accommodations that you need. I think the most important thing, as Rob said, is that there are poll workers there whose job it is to help you to vote. And so please be a good advocate for yourself, and whatever needs you have, please reach out to the poll workers and ask them for any assistance that you might have. And my understanding, Rob, is beyond your website, the United Way 211 program is also helping folks with information regarding voting. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that information is on our website, which is also going to be part of all the mail ballot instructions that we send voters. So yes, 211 has been a great addition to our team, and United Way has been great.
Awesome. So we covered a lot of information today. So as I mentioned, we are videotaping or recording this presentation today. So it will be available in video and audio formats later today at in-site.org/vote. So we have a page on our website that we've set up. So the recordings of today's workshop will be there. Links to the Secretary of State's office voting website will be there. So that'll be a good one-stop to get all your questions answered. We'll also be airing this presentation on Insight Radio on Tuesday afternoons at 2, Saturdays at 9 a.m. and Sundays at 6 p.m. now through pretty close to Election Day. So if you don't have internet access, you can listen to this presentation on Insight Radio during those times as well. We'll also have it up on our social media channels. So our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, our Twitter page, so that if you want to share it with folks who you think might want the information, you can hit the share button on social media and pass the presentation along to them as well. So I want to thank Rob for joining us today. I'm going to end the recording here, but we will continue for questions and answers for anybody that has it.